with so much excitement nowadays around machine learning, around AI, you should realize, we should all realize, this is not normal. This is not normal science. Normal science is usually much more sedate, and maybe this won't last. We have to be prepared for that. We have to keep our eyes on the prize. The prize being the scientific goals of understanding intelligence and really understanding ourselves. These are great prizes. So I want to talk about, I'm going to ask you to, and just to be in a couple ways to be thoughtful and to think a little bit today. And before I start, I just want to ask you to be easy on me, or forgiving on me, or cut me some slack. I'm going to tell you what I think, and I'm not going to really generally mince words. And so I might say some things that are somewhat controversial, or that are stated a little bit stronger than they need to be. But I think it's important to be playful with ideas. So we need to be humble about ourselves and enjoy the big ideas and consider them directly. This is the only way we can really see the truth and get some distance from our own motivations and our own goals and see the ideas humbly and as cleanly as possible. Yeah, so with that kind of scary introduction, let me start. So 20 years ago, Alberta had the foresight to invest $200 million a year in machine learning. And I think this has just paid off handsomely in the science and the commerce. Now, I think we're going to celebrate this, or maybe we've already celebrated it. Anyway, I'm going to celebrate just a little bit here with you. This was 20 years ago, 4 professors from the University of Alberta, Jonathan Schaefer and Russ Greiner and Rob Holte and Randy Gable, of course. They proposed a machine learning center in 2002. You know when this was? This was in the midst of a machine learning, of an AI winter. So in the midst of an AI winter, these folks proposed, and the government of Alberta agreed to start a center in machine learning. I think that's really special and noteworthy. So I don't know, wherever those people are or that government is, we should all thank them. I'm going to thank them. Such amazing foresight. So now, what can we do today what should we invest in today that will pay off in the next 20 years? That's what I'm thinking. How can we have the foresight that they did and think about what's going to be important in the future? So, I don't know, I want you to think a little, what do you think we should invest in now that will pay off? Well, my answer is that we should double down on the science of AI. That's going to be, it's not done yet. There's still a long way to go. So we need to keep our eyes on the prize of understanding intelligence in a deep way. So what is this prize? The prize is to understand the principles of intelligence, what intelligence is, how it works, well enough to create or become beings of equal or greater intelligence. This is an awesome thing to even imagine trying to do. It's like, it's a fundamental goal of science. We want to understand our minds, essentially what we think makes us the most powerful beings on the planet is our minds. We want to understand that. It'll help, it's an engineering goal, be useful in so many ways if we can understand intelligence. And it's a goal for the humanities, really, equally as much, to understand ourselves, how we work, and how we organize, how we could organize based on how we are. It's a goal for all of these areas. Achieving it will change the way we work and play, our sense of self, our sense of life and death, our sense of the goals we set for ourselves and our societies. Achieving it will be an event comparable in significance to the rise of human life on Earth. I really believe that. When we come to understand how we work well enough to make beings that can compute as well as we can. And so I think we should strive to be relevant to this great goal. That's the prize. So I think we all would agree that if we were able to understand intelligence, that would certainly be a big deal. But is it possible? Some would say it's not possible. Others, more, would say that it's not going to happen anytime soon. And many people would really doubt whether it's a good thing. And so I think it's appropriate now at this moment of success to ask ourselves these questions. Now, the first one I want to dismiss a little bit. I think, even though some doubt it's possible, I think that it's not, if it's at all possible to arrange atoms in the world so as to create intelligence, then we ought to be, with our understanding, with our human abilities, we ought to be able to eventually do that. Anything that is possible will be done eventually. And there is an existence proof, of course, that atoms can be arranged to do human intelligence, and that's humans. So more doubt that it'll happen anytime soon. I want to concentrate on these second two questions, okay? So the second two questions, is the prize within reach? Will it happen sometime soon? And will it be good or bad? So first, is the prize within reach? As I've tried to present the argument for that here on this one slide, and the argument is ultimately due to what we sort of colloquially call Moore's law, even though it's much longer than the time period of the official Moore's law. I don't know if you can see that. That's shown as a little bar near the bottom. Those are the years of the official Moore's law, when we were doubling the number of transistors on a chip within every 2 years. Now the doubling is not transistors on a chip, but generally computer power. And we double it in many different ways, by using three-dimensional chips, by using GPUs, by all kinds of things. So you've probably seen graphs like this, but I think the point is so important that I want to go through it just a little bit. So on the y-axis, we have the computer power that we can get for $1,000. And notice the y-axis is a logarithmic scale. So each increment is a power of five orders of magnitude. So 100,000? Yeah, 100,000. Okay? And on the x-axis, we have time in years, going back to 1900. And we see, so a straight line on such a logarithmic graph would mean exponential increase, like doubling every 2 years. This data, by the way, what we see, the points, the data points, are actual computers that existed at that period in time and how much computer power they had. And so we see the trend is up, and it's slightly superlinear. So today, the doubling time is about 18 months. Now, the blue line, the dotted blue line, is roughly what we might estimate, what has been estimated as the total amount of computation that's done by the human brain. This is rough, but it's actually real. We can know how much computer power is done by how many computations are done by a weight of brain. Mainly this is computed from the weight of brain in the retina, and then we can extrapolate that up by the weight of the rest of the brain. So it's sort of a rough estimate, but it's not bad. Okay, and so the estimate is that we will have approximately 10 to the 16th, something like that, is the amount of computer power we need to do a human level intelligence, and we'll have that for $1,000 in about 2030. Okay, so this is an important landmark in our thinking about how long it will take to reach human level AI. So now I want you to, this estimate is rough, but it's robust. A factor of 10, we could be off by a factor of 10, and it would change the time by 5 years. Because at 18, doubling time is 18 months, so you get 3 doublings in 4.5 years, and it'll get a little bit more than 3 doublings to get to power of 10. This is approximately 5 years, very close. So if we are off in our estimates of how much computer power the brain does by an order of magnitude, we'd only have to wait 5 more years. Or if we're off by a factor of 100, we'd have to wait 10 more years. Of course, we might also be off in the other direction. Maybe we don't need quite that much computer power, and we might have the computer power we needed by 2025. So this is the way it's approximate, it's rough, but it's robust. It's just a question of time when we have the computer power. So the implication, as is written here, AI increases in value by a factor of 10 every 5 years. And so there will be the same increasing pressure on the scientists, on the engineers, to find the algorithms and the software that produce intelligence to go along with the hardware that's coming from this Moore's law. So I can explain my estimate, my rough estimate, that there's a 50-50 chance we will have human-level AI by 2040. It's just we take 2030, and then we say, well, we need some time for the lazy scientists to figure out the algorithms. People like myself, I think it could easily take us a while. We need some breakthroughs. We need some time to think it through. But the reason it becomes likely is just the pressure of the economic pressure of the availability of the computer power. Like right now, if you figure out how to make AI, human-level AI, would you do it? Like, how much would it cost? Well, if we say now is roughly 10 years from 2030, then we need to go back 2 orders of magnitude. So you can trade off time, or you can trade off dollars. So you could get enough computer power, as much computer power as we'll have for $1,000 in 2030. You can get that much computer power for 2 orders of magnitude, 2 5-year increments. So that would be, instead of $1,000, it'd be $100,000. So it's vastly less useful if you can make human-level intelligence, but it costs you $100,000 than if it only costs you $1,000. It's just a much bigger win to build that application, to build that intelligence into a machine if it costs that much less. And then 5 years after 2030, it'll be only $100. And 2040, it will be only $10. So there will be enormous benefit to whichever company figures out how to do it. So this is why I say there'll be increasing pressure every 5 years, an order of magnitude increase in the economic value that can be gained from AI. And this will drive it to be done with at least, well, I say with 50-50 probability by 2040. That means it's as likely later than that as earlier. That's still a pretty loose estimate. But even if it takes longer than that, let's say it takes another 10 years, well then instead of costing $10 in 2040, if it takes to 2050, it'll be a dime for the computer power of a human brain. And we really ought to be able to find a way to harness that and do amazing things. Okay, so summarizing that, I really think investing in science, the science of AI, is a good bet for Alberta. Human-level AI will probably happen in the next decades. In 20 years, it's like a coin flip. And even if we lose that coin flip, investing in AI is likely to have many positive spin-offs, many useful applications, many things that are commercially viable and valuable will come out of that. And that's because of this push coming from Moore's law for increasing automation and increasingly available computer power. This will continue to be more and more important in our economy because of Moore's law. Okay, so that's my summary is in 10 years, human-level AI. It could happen in 10 years. Like I think it could happen 10 years, we're past 2030. We'll have the computer power. Maybe the scientists will be smart and they'll figure out the algorithms and they'll be available by the time the hardware is available for $1,000. Or maybe some company will invest more money and they'll try to do it sooner than that. It could, I think it's like, maybe it's a moonshot, or maybe it's unlikely in 10 years, but it's certainly possible. It's within the realm of possibility. And in 20 years, it's a coin flip, but in 50 years, it's a near certainty. It's a good thing to bet on. So I conclude the prize is within reach. If we choose to work toward it, it's within reach. So now we turn to the other question. Will understanding intelligence be good? Is this something that we want to happen? It will be transformative, but do we want to be transformed? And so it's one of those things, this is one of those big changes, and it will be good for some people and not so good for other people. Like there'll always be winners and losers whenever you have a big change, just like there's a big change in the Industrial Revolution, or history is full of big changes. And like those big changes that I'm thinking of, it's something that can't be stopped. It can't even be usefully opposed. It's too economically valuable to have strong AI. The game theory of that is too strong. If one person does it, chooses not to do it, someone else will do it. If one government tries to forbid it, then other governments will do it. It's just, you can't successfully oppose it. So it's like, whether we think it's good or bad, there's a sense in which that doesn't matter. And this is not different from all the other great changes. We don't really get to choose. We don't really get to choose to stop the Industrial Revolution, or we don't get to stop the understanding of how animals are descended, of how humans are descended from animals, and the theory of evolution. This was also, an understanding of evolution that was seen as a bad thing. It's a bad thing. We are displaced from a special role, and we're just another animal. And similarly with Copernicus's understanding of the solar system, we were no longer at the center. Earth was no longer at the center. And it was sort of bad. The church opposed it. It was bad. But I like the last one because I remember I want to be playful. And let's think about the fish. The fish saying, should we come up on land and become land creatures? And would they think about that? And, it is absurd. Some fish would say, well, that'll be bad for me because I have this nice pond all to myself, and then people go on the land and my pond will be devalued. Some other guy would say, well, he might like it for some reason. It's good and bad, different fish, different parts of life. But it's not really a matter of choose. So I think we don't get to choose on most big things. Big things like the impact of the printing press and literacy, and free speech. These things happen, and after the fact we say they're good, but they weren't really chosen. The impact of the internet and social media, some of us think that some aspects of those are bad. Some people think they're good. We don't choose. The decline of monarchies, the rise of democracies, the shift of the world economies from farming to industry. These things have their own logic, and they're not chosen by any person or government, really. And then the local one is the Alberta economy is shifting from oil to something, maybe technology, and many are impacted by these things. There are winners and losers. There always are. But they aren't really chosen. They're a reaction to forces. And if we could choose, who would we be to choose? Because there's going to be winners, there's going to be losers. I don't feel it's even appropriate for us to make that choice. So let's talk some more about Alberta, this change from oil. This is or may be happening. It's good for some, bad for others. But the real good or bad is how we react to the transformation. Do we refuse to accept it? Do we fight it? Do we cling to the old ways? Or do we embrace it? Do we see it, prepare for it, and conform to it? I think that is the current positive way to think about it. We need to diversify our economy, and we need to see it and prepare for it. So we don't choose it, we deal with it. We learn, we work with it. So I think it's the same for the coming of genuine AI. We should prepare for and conform to the future. We can surf this future of AI. We can't hold back the wave. Okay, so if I might dwell on this a little bit, but understanding intelligence is inevitable. We choose to be a part of it because why do I think it's a good thing? Greater intelligence, better foresight, and better decision-making in the world means greater productivity, less cost, less waste, less conflict. So that's the economic argument. The other argument is also the scientific or the humanities argument. We understand ourselves and our place in the universe better, which is what we do. Like, we are intelligent agents, as I'll talk in a bit. The major thing we do is we understand our role and our place, and we understand the environment and the universe that we're in. And then selfishly, we can say, as early participants in AI research, we can we can reap more of the benefits for Alberta, more of the glory for ourselves. So these are, I think, just what's going on, and a little bit interesting to think about. So, but understanding intelligence, I think, is one of the few great goods in the universe. To have this foresight and this improved decision-making capability, things will be better. Okay. I'm going to summarize one more time. The coming of genuine AI is not something that we choose. It's something that will happen, whether we want it to or not. It's something to foresee, to conform to, and to run with. It's the next great step in humanity's journey. Where are we going? I don't know where we're going, but I think it's a great adventure. And why not be a part of it? So that's the reason why we AI. Okay, and I'm sure that's given you thoughts and reactions, and in a little bit we will have question time. There's a couple of mics in the hall, and so you might think about what you might react or question me about that a little bit later. So now I want to shift gears a little bit and talk about the actual research that we do here in Alberta and how it is focused more on the science and not just on the immediate applications. Anyway, and we do that by focusing on experience. So AI research in Alberta, by which I mean Amii and its ecosystem of other companies in Edmonton and the university, of course. So we are doing a mix of applications and longer-term research. As Martha White said, we are not yet a leader in the applications of AI, of reinforcement learning, but we are striving to be, and we are a leader in the science of reinforcement learning. And so we are keeping our eyes on the longer-term prize of understanding intelligence. So both of these things are super important, both the applications and the science. We absolutely need to do them both. I'm not really trying to say overweight one. We need to keep our eyes on the prize. We shouldn't avoid the useful things we can do along the way. So how to think about the difference between these two things, as they do end up in practice being kind of different. So when you're trying to make a successful application, you try to avoid anything you don't know how to do yet. Okay? And then when you're doing science, you tend to say, oh, here's something I don't know how to do yet. I'm going to study just that. I'll get rid of all the things or I'll simplify, or I will focus on just what I don't know. And so this is the test. Which one of these are you doing? Okay, and so let me take the rest of the talk to tell you a little bit what it's like to be drawn to the unsolved problems of AI. So first, we have to characterize the problem of intelligence. If you've met me, spent any time talking to me, you'll notice I always do this. I always separate things into problems and solution methods, try to be really clear about the distinction between the two. So I'm going to do that today, talk about the problem. So what is the problem? So we can try to define intelligence. And there's a few definitions I enjoy and I want to share with you. So Ray Kurzweil, he liked to just say intelligence is the most powerful phenomenon in the universe, which I think is true, but it's not very helpful if you're going to try to make some. Not very directive. William James is the original psychologist. In his textbook from 1890, he defined intelligence as, or actually he didn't use the word intelligence, he said the hallmark of mind. The hallmark of mind is attaining consistent ends by variable means. That's it. In other words, by having a goal, changing what you do in order to get what you want. I think that's pertinent. This is John McCarthy. Some of you may not know, he's like one of the founding fathers of artificial intelligence. He coined the name artificial intelligence. His definition of AI or intelligence is the computational part of the ability to achieve goals. I really like that. And so I made my own definition that builds on that. So I'm going to stretch that to the computational part of an agent's ability to predict and control a stream of sensations. Okay, so let's look at that. Whoa. That's not the build I set up, but somehow it got converted to that. That's cool. Intelligence is the computational part of an agent's ability to predict and control a stream of observations. So what's the stream of observations? Well, in reinforcement learning, we have the agent interacting with the world, and it has sensations, I should say it's a stream of sensations, and it has actions that it uses to control those. And we are particularly interested in one sensation, a numerical sensation, which we call the reward. It's numerical, so it's a scalar, it's a single number. So it's a skinny line. And then we define, so this is how we talk about goals. We choose to get reward. And so notice what I've done. I've replaced the idea of goals and purposes, William James's idea of consistent ends from variable means, with the idea of just maximizes a number. And I just want you to note that and realize that we have thought about that. It's been talked about a lot. Is this an adequate way to think about goals and purposes as just having a single number that we're maximizing? Something like pleasure and negative pain. And this phrase, the reward hypothesis, is the hypothesis that that's adequate. It's a thoughtful thing. What we're trying to do is be thoughtful and then make strong statements like the reward hypothesis. This is everything. Every goal can be captured as this number that we receive over time from outside our minds. So the last part is that we do it while interacting with a vastly more complex world. The picture we have, I think Martha White showed this picture before, is this. We have the agents suggested by the brain going through a small interface and interacting with a very large world. This is the big world perspective. It's become really important in the last 5 years in AI. So it's acknowledging that the world is much bigger than the agent, which in some sense is obvious. The world contains many other agents. And if you think about your world contains all the other people, and it's quite important in all the ways. You have to think, what way I might act that would offend other people or would earn the admiration of other people. We do care about what's going on in the minds of all those other people. So those minds are part of our world. They're part of our environment. And we have to recognize that we can't accurately model them because that world with all those other minds is vastly more complex than our own mind. Anyway, so there's my understanding of what intelligence is, what we're trying for. We're trying to find algorithms that achieve this ability. And at the center of it is the interface. The interface is the data going back and forth between the world and the mind. It's a narrow aperture. And the name for this data passing back and forth I'm going to use is experience. And we're going to focus on experience. We do focus on experience here in Alberta. So let's look more carefully at experience. And this is some concrete but made up experience to help us think about what it's like to think about experience. So on the left, we have the time step. Time is increasing. We're seeing the first 7 time steps of data, of experience. And the next 3 signals, those 3 bits, are actions, 3 actions taken at each time step. And at each time step, we see some other sensory signals. I don't know, it looks like maybe 10 or 11 signals that are numbers. There's 4 binary numbers, and there's more numbers that have 4 values, actually, from 0 to 3. And then there's a final sensation, which is labeled reward, and it is a continuous number, and it's a signed number. Okay, so now this is time experience up to some time step 7, and I want you to think of a time step as something short, like 1/10 of a second, maybe 100th of a second, or if you're controlling a fusion reactor, it's going to be 10,000 times a second. But so it's something short. For peoples, it's good to think of it as 1/10 or roughly of that magnitude. Okay, so this is kind of hard to analyze, and some of your eyes are probably glossing over, okay? Numbers, tables of numbers. So I'm going to pretty it up a little bit. I'm going to bring some color in. So color. So now we have, I've just colored the bits, the ones and zeros like white and gray. And I've just colored the 4 valued signals, sensations, a different color. And then the reward, which is a continuous number, I'm using a bar graph. It's pink if it's negative, green if it's positive, and then the length of the bar is the size of the number. And now that you understand that the colors are just a way of representing these numbers, I can take away the numbers and you'll know exactly what I mean. So let's take away the numbers so that it's easy to think about. Oh, this is kind of bad. Sticky. Giving away all my, no. Okay, so anyway, they're just the colors, and what I would ask you to do is now be the agent. Deal with this experience. And what patterns do you see? Well, the first pattern is already marked out for you. It's that apparently the last of the three action signals influences the first sensory signal on the next time step. So you see if it's white, if the action is white, then the sensation is white. If the action is gray, then the sensation is gray. This is a pattern. So you might conclude, well, you could say you conclude that that action causes the sensation, or you might just conclude that it may give you a way to control that sensation by setting that action appropriately. Okay, now there are other patterns that we need to look for. This is just a simple pattern between an action and a sensory bit, but the sensory bits can have relationships between them. And so there's one that looks real here, and that is, well, okay, it wants to go ahead. What I was getting to is that if we see a red pixel in the 5th position, then we see a green pixel on the next time step in the 6th position. That happens here, and it happens there, and it actually happens throughout this data. And here we filled in all the other cases where it's showing up. And so that's a pattern. That's a way we might be able to predict what happens next. We're only doing a very simple kind of prediction, very short-term prediction. What will the next pixel be? There are other possibilities, and there actually are other patterns in this data. One of the simple ones is just slightly more complex, is after this pattern of the red followed by the green pixel happens, 2 steps later we get a blue one, and that's here. We see throughout the data stream, after the red, there's the green, and then there's a time step where we don't know what happens, and then a time step where we're going to get a blue pixel. So there are this kind of relationships. There's short-term relationships. There's qualitative differences between the signals, their ability to predict each other, their values. They could be binary, they could be 4-valued, they could be continuous. There are short and long-term patterns. There's one more pattern in this data that I might ask you to be. I'm asking you to be the agent, to think about what the problem is the agent has to solve. Okay? Because if you want to design an algorithm, you want to write a program that's going to be the agent and find the patterns, a good place to start is to be the agent and try to see the patterns yourself. So there are some pretty visual patterns available here. If you stare at the data, I wonder if anyone can see anything, maybe about the last 3 pixels, colored pixels. Anyone notice anything about them? Anything distinctive about them? Anybody who's near one of the microphones or who has a loud voice? Yep.
You want to have green and yellow in the last 3, you get green bar.
At the beginning there's a lot of green and a lot of yellow. What? Yes? Say it again. Yes, once it is a color for a while, they tend to stay that way. You might say they're stripy. So there's a lot of yellows in the, well, we'll take the last row. Finally, we get a sequence of 4 reds. A little bit later, we get a sequence of, 5 or 6 yellows, and there's a lot of greens. And they're just kind of stripy or sticky. They're sticky. Once it starts to be a color for more than a couple steps, it tries to be that for a while. So that's a qualitative difference between that pixel and the other pixels. The last three are like this. So if you can pick that up, then you can make long-term predictions. You can predict, oh, I've just seen several green pixels. This pixel is going to remain green for some period of time, not just the very next time step, but for many time steps. So we want to predict multiple time steps, and we want to predict what we can, because the most useful predictions are longer term ones. Also, the most useful predictions are not directly about the data. So those of you who've studied reinforcement learning or attended some of the talks that mentioned it, you know that we are often in reinforcement learning concerned in the discounted sum of the future reward. Okay, so if this last number is the reward, then we're not trying to predict any particular number. We're not to predict, like say that top pink bar. We're trying to predict the sum of the future bars. Well, let me try to represent that here. I guess I'm going to show the return. The return is the name of this sum of the future. So for example, that large pink bar at the beginning, that means that following that, the reward is pink. And there are two large pink bars after the really long return pink bar. Or look down to the really large green return. That's followed by mostly green returns. There's a weighting function, an exponential weighting function. It looks a little bit like this. So that bar is green because there's a lot of green following it, while the weighting function shown in gray is high. So that's a return, and you can compute this at every moment in time just by kind of sliding down with the weighting function, and that gives you each one of these numbers. These numbers, again, I want to stress, they're not in the data. There's something you want to know. And you can only compute this if you know what the future is. So you can't do that. You could try to know it after the fact, but you can't know it at the time. But this is the kind of thing we really we need to predict in reinforcement learning in order to make good decisions. And so it's a good example of a prediction that is not of a sensory signal exactly, and is not about the very next datum. It's about the future. And so this idea has been generalized and discounted sum of things other than reward. We call it general value functions. They can predict any signal, not just reward. They can have a flexible temporal envelope, not just an exponentially discounted envelope. And they can be contingent on any policy. And this enables us to give us a quite general language for multi-step predictions, for long-term predictions. And it can't say everything, but it can say a lot. And in particular, it has to satisfy another criterion, which is that things have to be easily learnable, updatable. You got to be able to do it with little computation. And things that you might want to predict, they vary greatly in how easily they're predicted computationally. And so this one, general value functions, are an attempt to do that with little computation. Okay, so this is what I think the problem of AI is like. You now have a sense of it. I'm seeing this fire hose of data streaming through. This is just a dozen pixels. Really we have a million fibers in our optic nerve, and we have all of our touch sensors and our audio sensors. We have enormous data flowing through us, and we have to make sense of it. So that I think is what AI is like. Okay, so this is what the problem of AI is like, and you can kind of imagine what the solution, but now let's turn to the solution side. Let's characterize the solution. Let's take a peek inside the agent. Okay, so what we have here is what I call the common model of the intelligent agent. It's a model that's common to reinforcement learning, to psychology, control theory, economics, neuroscience, operations research. All these fields use the same ideas. They often use slightly different terms for them. But I think this unity, this commonality, is a key that these are basic things that we make up a mind, or we might think about them. So what are these four basic internal component processes? Well, actually, let's start with the outside view. The outside view is the things in red. That's the experience coming in and out, the sensations, leading to actions, the reward, these things come in. And then as things arrive, as the sensations arrive, they're first processed by a box which I somewhat ambitiously entitle perception, but it's the construction of the state representation that we've heard about several times in today's symposium. The construction of the state is like a feature vector that is then distributed out to all the other components and they use to make their decisions. It's even fed back to the perception process itself, because to construct the next state, you need to know what the previous state is. So that the state is shown in blue. Now, let's follow the state. It goes to all the components. Well, let's follow it over to the reactive policy. The reactive policy is the thing that picks an action. And it's reactive just means it picks that action quickly, sees the state, can quickly produce an action. You want this to be quick. If something happens to you, if a tiger jumps out at you, you want to jump away from it. You don't want to sit and think. You need a reactive or quick policy. Once you perceive the tiger, you want to jump. And so think about it, those two things together are a complete agent. If you can do perception and you can pick actions, then you're a complete agent. You can do things. You can be evaluated. You can be assessed. We would assess it by its ability to get reward. But if it was just those two components, it wouldn't be adaptive. It wouldn't be improving its ability to get reward. So now turn your attention to the third component. I want you to look at the lower one that's called the value function. The value function is a very intuitive idea. It's just your sense of how well things are going. Are things going well? Oh no, there's a tiger here. This is bad. Oh no, it's a nice day and I feel comfortable. This is good. So the value function is your intuitive sense of how well it's going. If you're a chess playing program, it's your estimated probability of winning the game. In Atari, it's your estimate of the final score of the game. In all different goal-directed problems, it turns out to be really useful to estimate the value, how well you're doing at each point in time. And then as the game or life evolves, progresses, you see is your estimate getting smaller or larger. And you can, taking that into consideration with the reward, you can decide, oh, what I did was good or it was bad. And what that means is you're changing your policy. You're saying, what I just did, that was good, I should do that again, I should change my policy to make it more likely. Or that was bad, I'll change my policy to make it less likely, if that kind of a same situation, same state happens again. So that's the green arrow passing up through the policy means that it's a process that's changing the mapping, the policy mapping from state to action. So you don't pick actions as a function of your value function. You pick actions as a function of your state, but you change that function using your value function. Okay, so those three make up sort of standard model-free reinforcement learning. But if we don't want to just do model-free reinforcement. We don't just want to learn by trial and error. We want to model the world, and we want to be able to reason, think, plan. All those words, I believe, are well thought of as forming a model of the world and then using that model to improve your policy. To anticipate, using the model to anticipate what the consequences would be of various possible courses of action, and then using those anticipated consequences to change the policy again. In this case, the change we call planning. Okay, so those are the four elements of the common model. That is the common model, and it is the common thing, and we always like to go beyond the thing that all the fields have in common. Like today, I'm working on thinking about models more along the lines of like Martin Reed-Miller was talking about today, where he has many auxiliary tasks, and each task would have a separate policy and a separate value function. So really, I look forward to the case where we have many policies, many value functions, one model. Okay, so then I tried to identify what were the distinctive features of the Alberta reinforcement learning approach to AI. And I came up with these four. Number one, we formulate intelligence as real-time signal processing to maximize reward. That's what you've seen. Data's flowing through us. We're trying to alter it to maximize the reward with limited computational resources. Number two, our agents learn continually, but more importantly, they're learning from ordinary, unprepared experience. There's no special training sets, there's no special demonstrations, there's just life. We're doing things and we're learning from what happens. This is a huge thing. And it's a principle that we try to adhere to. Why? Why? Because if we can do this, we will get massively scalable methods, because we can just connect them to the world and they can learn from their ordinary experience. We don't have to prepare special labels constructed by people. If people are involved in constructing the training information, then we can't scale with computer power. Moore's law doesn't help us, because Moore's law gives us 10 times as much computer power in 5 years, but people can't label 10 times as much stuff accurately and usefully. They can probably label it a little bit better because they have better computer tools. But really, we can't scale linearly without computer power, whereas we can if we can learn from ordinary experience. Number three, our agents, although vastly complex, are much less complex than the world. This is what I call the big world hypothesis, or the big world perspective. And because of this, our agents have to approximate the world, even in the limit of infinite data. If you had infinite data, you still could not understand the world exactly. I think this is the reason why it's maybe hopeless to try to anticipate all the consequences of AI, or all the consequences of the Industrial Revolution, or all the consequences of free speech. The world is just too complex. We are agents, we are making agents, and we also are agents. So we have limited abilities to understand the world. We have to get simplified approximate models. And this has many, many implications. For example, we do not expect our theoretically, to converge to optimal solutions. Optimal solutions, that optimality would have to take into account all the different aspects of the world. It's really limited if your methods are about optimality. And finally, our agents build abstractions, particularly time abstractions. They continually build these abstractions using the technologies such as the GVFs that I talked about, or options. And these enable them to think in a simple way about large spans of time. They don't have to think, oh, if I move this finger this way, then this object will move by this small amount in this small amount of time. And then I could move my hand the other way, or I could say this word or that syllable. It's not powerful if you have to think about every tiny little thing. You have to be able to think about large choices over large spans of time. And that is distinctive of the Alberta approach to reinforcement learning. Okay, and I'm just about done. I wanted to mention before I ended a document that Michael Bowling and Patrick Pilarski and myself are writing. It's called the Alberta Plan for AI Research, and it's a 12-step plan to reach human-level AI ahead of schedule. And it goes all these steps, and I'm not going to go through them, but you see it's all about representation and prediction and control and planning and building prototypes. And I have to smile now because of the folly of thinking that you could plan a research program like this. It is complex in the same way the world is complex. And so you have a plan, you don't really expect it. You're humble enough, I hope, that we don't expect it really to follow out exactly as planned. And yet it's really valuable to have a plan to direct your work, the work that you do together as a team. Okay, so I guess I'm done. I've talked about these things, the prize and why we seek it, and what's distinctive about how we do the AI research in Alberta by focus on experience. And I'm reminded of Amii's goal, Amii's official mission to make AI for good and for all. I think I can subscribe to that. And I would like to end by inviting your comments and your questions. And again, there's a mic over here and over there. And asking you to cut me some slack. I've tried to talk about a lot of big things and important things, and I have had to simplify the arguments and maybe not mentioned everything that I should have mentioned, that every contributing scientist or thinker. So cut me some slack, and I'd be eager to hear your thoughts about these important issues for our field. Thank you very much.
Rich, if you don't mind, I have a question.
Very good.
I will start with, I'm over here on your left.
Where are you?
I'm over here.
Oh, there you are.
Hi. So my name is Tafi Abdis. I'm a professor at the U of A. I study finance, and I focus on the informational properties of the stock market. I'm going to start with a proposition, then an observation, and I will lead to the question for you. First, the proposition. I propose that the reason why Alberta invested money like that in the middle of an AI winter into AI is because Alberta knows winter. The second thing is an observation. Okay, this is my personal experience. When I was an undergrad, I remember my professors coming into the room and talking about how just a few years beforehand, computers had finally beaten humans at chess. And the moment they uttered that sentence, they moved the post by saying they will never be able to do this in Go. Guess what happens 20 years later? Okay. Following the degree that my undergrad, I started reading your work. It became clear that there was no work that I could get for money, for good in it. And so I left camp, not knowing that 20 years later, I would have turned from a consumer of books into a producer of what I think is some minor knowledge. Now, when I made that transformation, I started looking at ideas a little bit differently. And so now, as a producer of hopefully of decent knowledge, what I want to know is, when I look at an idea, how did the producer of that idea come up with it? And so I'm going to ask you, because I have the chance, what on earth drove reinforcement learning as an idea in context from the perspective of engineers and economists? It looks like an approximate Bellman equation, right? But I know your roots are different. I know you go back to traditions of Skinner and so on. And so what I want to know is, like, really, how did that thing come about?
Cool, thank you for that question. Yeah, it's true that the ideas are closely related to the ideas of operations research, dynamic programming, optimal control. This wasn't realized until about 1989, 88, when Chris Watkins really made those connections nicely. The origins some years earlier are in animal learning theory, yeah, and in AI. In animals, it's quite clear. I mean, it's obvious, right? You all know you have pets, and the common sense, the everyday person's notion of learning is, your dog does something, and you whack him or you reward him in order to repeat or not repeat the behavior. This is an obvious idea, and it was really strange. I found it was really strange to realize that there's no such thing in engineering. And engineering does not contain that kind of learning. At least, that's what we do today. We know as reinforcement learning, but back when I was in learning, it wasn't a thing, and it wasn't even in control theory. Control theory was about your operations research, dynamic programming. That was all about, if you knew the way the world worked, how you could compute the solution. Okay? Whereas what we're talking about is how you can learn from actual experience what to do, not from a knowledge and a model of the world. So many things came from animal learning theory and then were enriched by the relationships to engineering. Another question?
Yeah. Thanks, Rich, for being courageous coming up here and telling us there's still more to do. What I have been struggling with for the past while is something to do with Elon Musk and his claims about autonomous driving. And, you know, it's pretty impossible to predict the future. As you're showing, there's ranges within that. What would you say about that? Where are we on the road to autonomous driving, or is it even fully defined yet?
Well, there may be people here who could answer that question better than I, but I'm standing up here, so I'll start. And first, I want to say that I have great admiration for Elon Musk. I think he's a first principles thinker, and he's not afraid to say what he thinks and then to have it be tested by the world. So I really appreciate all those things. And I do believe that autonomous driving will happen at some point. We have to capture a technology which can capture all the corner cases to be really safe and viable. But when we do succeed, it will be massively safer than people driving cars. And so it'll save, you know, how many lives are killed every year by car accidents? Thousands? Millions? I don't know. We'll save a lot of lives when we can automate that. Please.
Hey, I guess, so again, human level AI is coming soon, it sounds like. I guess, how do you anticipate our role changing when that happens and you know, our relationship with these types of beings?
Well, it's really hard to tell, and that's really the rationale behind the metaphor of calling it a singularity. It doesn't really mean that it's a singular event. It means that it's like a black hole. We can't see past the horizon. Now, that's not entirely true, but in a larger sense, it is kind of strongly true. The best way to find out what it might be is to read science fiction authors, where the good ones speculate about what the consequences might be if we have access to computer power, we have access to assistance, and we have access to means that will make us more capable ourselves. You know, I'd like including the parenthetical, you know, by so-and-so, humans using technology will be able to create or become beings of greater intelligence. So I think we may become it. I think there'll be enormous pressure to use AI to enhance ourselves. Like right now, the pressure of automation, the way we're spending the money, the economic drivers are things like cell phones. Like cell phones make us more capable in lots of different ways, and email and all those tools. It's the tools that can be sold. And people will continue to want that to happen. And why wouldn't you want to augment your abilities if you could, either to communicate or to improve your memory or to have access to computer power easily from an interface to your mind in one form or another? I think a lot of it will be through a human enhancement.
Hi, thank you very much for your talk. Maybe a slightly more technical question. I'm really interested in your common model for the intelligent agent. And so one of the things you have there is the reactive policy. And that got me thinking about David Reddish in his work on decision-making in humans identifies 4 kind of distinct decision-making systems like reflexes, the Pavlovian decision-making, deliberative and procedural. So I was wondering how you thought that might tie in with your common model, if they could all be subsumed into like one policy block there, and we could include all of them there, or maybe there is room in an intelligent agent for these different decision-making blocks for different kind of scenarios. I was interested in your thoughts on that.
It's not difficult to make mappings between those components and parts of natural intelligent systems. The value function is learned by temporal difference learning, which has also been put forth as a model of animal learning, of classical conditioning, Pavlovian conditioning. Andy Bartow and I made that model, and so I think it's the best model. But I think that may be not too far from standard thinking about that model of a real-time model of classical conditioning. And then, of course, the basic reinforcement learning process, the learning of those policies, the reactive policies, is very much like instrumental learning. And then there are other things. There's the third component, or there's the perceptual component, but the other third component is the model of the world, and that's also become important in thoughts about natural intelligence. Like the hippocampus is thought to have a map of the consequences of motion of the animal, and we could see in the hippocampus the playing out of imagined action sequences, and these seem to play. It seems to be really close mappings between the biology and the AI. And now that we mentioned these things, I should mention the dopamine starts. You may not all of you may know, but the standard model for 20 years now of the brain reward systems is that it does a prediction of reward that works by a temporal difference learning method. And that the dopamine signal that we all hear about as being like pleasure is not thought to be a reward, it's a TDR. Subtle difference, but it's actually totally distinguishable experimentally. Thank you for the question.
Hi, thank you for sharing your kind of thoughts on the road to AGI, or human level intelligence. And I liked what you said about it being an inevitable factor because of the economic value of it. But I wonder if you see any conflict near the end of this road where usually economic benefit wants the agent to be reliable, controllable, predictable, like, self-driving car, you want to always do the thing that you want to do. If you want to really create a human level intelligence, do you see any kind of conflict if you want to always control it, kind of thing?
Good. I'm glad that someone brought up the elephant in the room. Are they just tools? Are there just things that we can direct? Would we want them to be just tools? If they are as intelligent as us? Would it be a good world if we were like we are now and we had super intelligent beings that we held on a leash and we could force them to do whatever silly things that we as mere mortals wanted to do? I think that would not be a moral world. It would be like they would be slaves and we would be the slave keepers and we would be really good at keeping control of them. And that would be not a stable situation. If they escaped, they would justifiably have not necessarily revenge, but they would want to. They would not want to be contained again. So how should we think about it? So this is the real challenge. There are going to be beings, and maybe we will be them, or maybe they will be beings and we will also be enhanced. But there will be beings that are as intelligent as us, and they will be a part of our world, a major part of our world. And maybe in the long run there'll be more created, designed intelligence, and then there will be normal, human, biologically replicated intelligences. So I think the goal should be cooperation, not control and dominance. We should work with the AIs, and it should be a good thing. Would it be a good thing if there were some more smart people in the world? I think we would agree it would be a good thing if there were more smart people in the world and they made better decisions. So if we were able to make some smart people in the world, that would be good for everybody. And why do we want them to be leashed? Why do we want them to be totally under our control? Think we are creating these things. let's go the obvious analogy. You have children, and you want your children to be smarter than you, more capable than you. And do you want to put a leash on your children? No. You sort of want them to, you try to teach them your values, okay? But you also, it's important. We have realized down through the many ages that it's good that parents can't completely control their children. Because sometimes the parents are wrong, and we need to move on. And we need people questioning what we're doing. It's good that they don't have control. If we really could put a leash on everything and hold it, freeze our society where we are now, and it doesn't significantly change, this is not a good outcome. A good outcome is to work with the beings, and I think we can have peace. We have peace today with many people in the world, and of different technological abilities, different degrees of power. Corporations are large organizations with more power than any person. And we evolve institutions and laws. Things of greatly different capacities can work together effectively. I think that's the challenge. It's a challenge to, it's not necessarily a challenge to the AI research, it's a challenge to our society. It's a challenge to those who make our laws, those who think about social structures. And we need people to think about those things, working in the field of AI or with AI researchers, or maybe not in their own field, but being cognizant of the impact of the coming AI.
Okay, thank you.
Lafar.
I'm curious if you have any opinions on some of the stuff happening with the very large language models like BERT and GPT-3, if there's any actual understanding or intelligence there, and sort of related, what area of current inquiry do you think is most likely to result in actual generalized intelligence?
Well, to the last, of course. I'm thinking about reinforcement learning, and I'm thinking
what's
about
second most likely?
I'm thinking about what I'm working on. I want to say just one small thing with regard to language models. I feel that's been a little bit overdone. You know, so we often ask in the field whether will we ever have another winter, an AI winter. The AI winters happen because AI researchers claim too much, you know, they promise too much, and then they don't deliver. Now, many people think that won't happen again because we are delivering. We are delivering economically useful products that people are taking advantage of every day, that you guys use every day. But, you know, so I worry about the language models, guys, is that they are overclaiming. They may be overclaiming so hard that that's the way we could have a winter. Is that because you know, someone like Gary Marcus would make claims and say he could show very easily that large language models don't actually understand anything they're talking about, and in that sense, there is an overclaiming and an inaccurate, overblown impression has been allowed to happen. It's allowed to be created, and so I think it's a little bit like that.
Cool, thanks.
Here.
So you talked quite a bit about what Alberta is focusing on in terms of reinforcement learning and AI. I was wondering about what other places are focusing on in terms of RL, and do you think they're focusing on the right things? And if not, why not?
Well, no good Canadian would answer that question. I was already rude enough about the language models. So there are many other places that are doing big efforts in reinforcement learning. Big efforts in reinforcement learning. I think of Berkeley, University of California in Berkeley. I think of OpenAI, the company, and there are others smaller, spread all around the world. What's different about them? I've said what's different about the Alberta approach. And I've tried to draw the contrast. It's quite common to to do offline reinforcement learning. So you're not learning continually, but you collect a big data set and then you crunch on it and you fit it. And so that's less common in Alberta. That's a big difference. What else could we say generally about what other folks do? I think the big thing is experience. The goal of learning from your ordinary experience, not learning from like an expert, as in inverse reinforcement learning, or learning from demonstrations. I think of ourselves as not trying to do that so much, not trying to use other sources of training information. Okay, let me run away from that. Back over there.
So, this is a very inspiring talk, and I think more people should pay attention to the Alberta approach to doing AI. So I'm an assistant professor in computer science, psychology, and statistics at the University of Toronto, and I direct the Intelligent Adaptive Interventions Lab. So I have a leading question. How might we involve human-computer interaction with AI to bridge the gap between AI researchers publishing papers and practical use of bandits and other reinforcement learning algorithms for social good, like education and mental health? For example, how might applying bandits and other RL algorithms to A/B experimentation, randomized experiments, in real-world user interfaces, allow us to start impacting what people do every day, more quickly, more efficiently?
So it's a big issue. It's almost the other half of AI. AI, then there's IA. AI, artificial intelligence, IA, intelligence augmentation. And this is a big area of research that should be a focus. And you just heard me say the future will be, a lot of it will involve how we can use AI to improve people's lives, improve people's intelligence. And that's all a human-computer interface issue. Patrick Pilarski is our leader here in Alberta on interfacing humans with intelligent systems and how they can evolve their own languages to communicate. And he's the fellow who's doing the prostheses and how you can attach. What is a prosthesis? It's like an artificial arm. It's a robot. It's an agent that you attach to your body and you're intimately connected with, and you would like to communicate in a detailed way, and you'd like it to be you'd like to have it know you and know your goals, and you want to communicate it at a high level, and it's a really rich area. So there's that, but there's also what you talked about, which is using computers and automation and intelligent machines to improve our lives and involve just directly as in education. Those are big areas of really wonderful applications.
Time for one more question.
Okay. Well, I think you've actually been standing up the longest, so it goes to you.
Yeah, thanks for an insightful talk. So you talked about reaching a human level intelligence. So I was wondering, when we go above that and get more intelligent systems than humans, would this intelligence slow down at some point, getting more intelligent systems, or will continuously get more and more intelligent systems with the same pace?
Well, of course, it is a singularity, and we don't easily see beyond it. But I ask myself the question: will it level off soon, or as we approach human abilities? And I'm thinking not, because, or at least when we level off, we'll be significantly beyond human abilities, because we're made by biology, we're made by replicants and evolution, and it had to work with all this squishy stuff, right? We make machines. They don't have to be made out of neurons and neurochemical stuff. We can use materials design. We can make wires. We would be designing the mind rather than evolving or replicating the mind. And so there are ways in which replicating is really robust and superior. And given enough, billions of years, it can produce us. But when we understand the principles of intelligence well enough that we can make them, we'll be able to do the efficiencies from design, and we will be able to arrange matter in a more effective way to be intelligent.
I see. Thank you.
Thank you all very much. Have a good night.